Consulting LLC. And with that, we have a brief presentation, but more importantly, I wanted him to give this body an overview of actions that you have taken which have resulted in a major return on investment to the tune of millions of dollars, actually more than $12 million in funding that would not have been realized without Mr. Clyburn's efforts. So if you would, Mayor Johnson, allow Mr. Clyburn to speak at this time.
Certainly will. Mr. Clyburn, welcome. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is William Clyburn, Jr. I am the managing partner of Clyburn Consulting, LLC. I do federal government relations. I've actually been in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. But to be clear, I was born and raised in the CSRA. I came from Aiken, South Carolina, spent a lot of time in Augusta, and I spent a lot of time when I was working with Senator Zell Miller. And because I was the Senate Appropriations for Transportation and Infrastructure, I was working with Senator Chambliss, Senator Isaacson, and so we had a bipartisan working group to make sure that we were able to bring federal funds to the state of Georgia. So in that 30-year time frame, I've been able to understand the Senate appropriations process. It's a labyrinthine process. It's a lot of ins and outs, but because of the relationships that we were able to garner and because of the connectivity that we're able to have, we're able to know the nuances and know the deadline dates and also understand what projects are the most viable. And so you may remember that there were no more congressional directed spending, what they called earmarks. They stopped that in 2010. And so there was a 10-year hiatus, but in 2021, they started that process again. And so I was working with the Coliseum Authority because they were interested in some infrastructure. But I was asking the question as to, well, does the city and the county, have they put in projects that they can do for water infrastructure, for transportation? They had not done any at that point in time, and the deadline was fastly approaching. So I was able to get some of those projects in before the deadline, even before we had formal agreement. Fortunately, those processes worked very well because, as you can see, in 2021, Augusta Richmond County was able to obtain over $7 million in infrastructure improvements that were not part of your budget. So there were deferred maintenance that you were able to do with water infrastructure and water quality because of those federal funds that came in. So we continued that process in 2022. And as you can see from the memo that I sent on January 5th, we were able to get an additional $5 million for water infrastructure projects because a lot of people don't understand. Some people still have septic tanks. Some people still have to deal with I and water overflow and wastewater overflow. And the water quality is poor in some communities. And being from this area, I had a real appreciation for, regardless of how you vote, Republican or Democrat, or regardless of your zip code, everybody should have some clean drinking water. And everybody should be able to have wastewater systems that work well. I spent time and years working with the sewer mayor, she likes to call herself, in Atlanta, when we had the combined sewer overflow issue in Atlanta, Georgia. But the same issues that are in the bigger cities, they also in important cities like Augusta, Aiken, and in the CSRA. So we were able to take that experience and to bring that to the bear with the Senate appropriators. So now we work with Zell Miller and Chambliss and Isaacson and Max Cleland, but now we have two new senators. We have Ossoff and Warnock. And so we were able to forge a relationship and bond with the appropriation staff and those committees and those offices. And so now we still see dynamics coming down the pipeline where there's a possibility that although you have a highly competitive process, because you're not just competing against other regions in Georgia, but you're competing with limited funds around the country. But because we know the CSRA, because we understand the issues, we were able to zealously advocate for Augusta Richmond County. And so even though we were able to beat the odds because of those dynamics, and so it involves knowing the community and involving the community, because having community leaders and organizations write in letters in support of these projects, it ups the viability of those projects. So the community folks, the congressional folks, the commission, and the commission staff. And so one of the reasons we were able to turn things around so quickly and effectively is because it's been a collaboration. in my January 5th memo, the publication dates or when the deadlines would be for 2024 moving forward were not published yet. But I projected that sometime in March would be the deadline dates. So the interim administrator got a team together so that we can talk about priority projects before the deadline dates because we don't know them. But we knew they would be coming up soon. Well, those dates are now published. And thank God we had those meetings because the team is ready for some priority projects. I don't tell you what to do, but once you tell me what your priority projects are, I go to work in terms of making the connectivity and zealously advocating. So the deadline dates are March 7th and March 10th for your senator offices. That's right around the corner. But we've already had the meetings, and we're having internal meetings to talk about how do we get those projects to be more viable. And so those are conversations we're going to have moving forward so that by March 7th, we can push the button for Senator Ossoff's office. And by March 10th, we can push the button for Senator Warnock's office so that we can have more projects that get in the pipeline and hopefully get funded. So the odds are long, but because of the collaboration that we've had with the community, with the commission, with the staff, and with the congressional staff, we've been able to move the ball. And so the presentation can go on for a whole hour, but that's the meat of the presentation, is about what we've done. And this is not our first rodeo. So when I was working with Zell Miller back in the early 2000s, I was working with the Aviation Commission to bring in money. And you all know that wonderful, beautiful airport that people talk about when they come in for the Masters and when they're traveling. It used to be an amalgamation of old World War II buildings, built in 1941. It had old buildings that they connected together. And so they needed a new terminal, but where was the money coming from? So we were able to help get $5 million to help put an infusion of money, and now you have this beautiful terminal. I take pictures every time I come through. I want people to know what Augusta Richmond County is doing. And just to be clear, I'm an engineer from Georgia Tech. I'm a lawyer, but at 100, I always think I can do things that are big. And so at 113 pounds, I told my college football coach daddy that I was going to go out for football. What I didn't understand is that I was going to be on the same team as William Refrigerator Perry. And so now you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm pretty good at it. I have no NFL career. And so knowing that, understanding that my obligations are beyond the professional obligation of what I'm doing for Augusta Richmond County is really personal for me because this is where I'm from. Thank you, Administrator.
I wanted to give this body a highlight of some of the projects that we have presented to Mr. Clyburn to obtain his professional expertise in moving forward. The first is an engineering project, storm and sanitary sewer improvements for the Forest Hill Basin number 10. The age and condition of the existing piping system increases the occurrence of dangerous flooding. This project is located near the Rays Creek area, so you may have recalled Dr. Malik and his team doing some work in this area in the past. The project total cost is estimated around $3.7 million, although not fully funded. This project was submitted for consideration for FY23, which means we entered an application last year for FY23 dollars. It was not funded. As a result, we are going to enter a similar application, making some tweaks to it just to improve its viability. The second project is a drainage basin improvements project, This project is also in the Rocky Creek area. It is estimated at $5.5 million. It has been considered one of the higher dollar projects, and Mr. Clyburn has suggested that we lower the dollar amount. If we lower the dollar amount, and if this project is partially funded, there will be an ask from this body with some additional dollars to help get it over the finish line. But this project is an extension of and will complement other Rocky Creek drainage projects that we've done throughout the area. Funding for this effort will support Augusta Utilities also. So this will be a dovetail project in which we fund one, it will offer some additional benefit to the other. This area is also severely compromised due to no defined stormwater conveyance system. This increases the safety risk as runoff encroaches on residential dwellings. I'm sure the commissioners in this district may have received some communication from customers, from citizens, especially in times of heavy rain. Another project that you've heard about, and we have a representative from the Augusta Fire Department here with us today is our Emergency Operations Center. This project is estimated to cost $11.5 million. It was not funded through SPLOST 8. The EOC was once located in the 911 building. However, once we renovated 911, the EOC was displaced, and they now occupy temporary space in the Augusta Utilities building on, I was about to say Walton Way, on Walker Street. Thank you for that. And so with them sharing space, it has been the desire of the department for many years to occupy their own isolated facility. I will be bringing a presentation to you or proposal to you in the near future, which will be able to assume a space for the EOC, but of course it does come with a price tag. The Greater Augusta region has not had this facility since 2019, and because of that, the project supports not only Augusta, but also Burke County as well as Columbia County in the needs of emergency operations. The next project is a transportation project. You may be familiar with our transfer station located right down the street on Broad Street. It has been there for quite some time. The facility is now over 30 years old and has reached its useful life. The facility is experiencing multiple facility needs in which we do not have adequate funding to afford it. The facility also is struggling with some ADA compliance issues as well as multimodal capability, which is needed. This particular project is estimated to cost about $12 million. While it is not what is considered to be a shovel-ready project, it will not make the final cut to be presented to Mr. Clyburn's office as well as to Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff's office because it has not reached the full stance of being able to be presented. But I did want you to hear about it because it was considered, although the department, and we have representatives from Transit here today, the department realizes that we have a little bit of work before it's ready for congressional spending consideration. Because of that, a planning grant will be pursued with the expectation of applying for earmark funding in FY25, which means we will apply in 24 for dollars in 25, provided they're still even affording us that opportunity. Then we have some water projects. The first from Augusta Utilities is a green energy improvement project for canal hydropower. The Augusta Canal was built in 1845. And so just alone with that time frame, you are aware that there are some maintenance and repairs that are required over time. The canal currently has 3 active hydroelectric facilities near downtown Augusta that is currently operated by the Canal Authority. This project is a $18 million project, and for that very reason may not make the cut because congressional spending dollars, although it is a large funding pool, they are interested in projects that are of smaller dollar amounts. With this particular project, if we're funded $3 million, it will still leave Augusta a $15 million deficit. So for that reason alone, it will not make the final cut. But again, I wanted to make sure this body was aware of some of our planning discussions. The next project is a community-driven sewer project. This is near Country Place. That's a larger subdivision in the area that is still served by septic tanks. A sewer trunk is accessible to the south of the neighborhood. However, the cost to construct the sewer system is about $4.5 million. This project did make the cut because even if Augusta receives $2 million or $3 million, it does not leave us with a large delta. This project would improve the water quality in the Spirit Creek receiving body, and again is estimated to cost about $4.5 million. The last project, but definitely not the least, is the Doug Bernard Parkway Water Improvement Project. This project concerns potable water as it interconnects between the southern and northern systems. This project is $4.5 million, and while this interconnectivity was planned 20 years ago, it was stopped because the site was potentially polluted. We do not have someone from Augusta Utilities here today. However, if there are any questions, we definitely can make sure we are able to field those at a later date for you. Newer pipeline technology, along with an alternate route, will eliminate the risk from the site, and this will also allow true backup of the potable water system to critical areas of commerce, health, and population. Dr. Malik is also present to speak to you concerning any engineering projects that you all would have any questions from that we are planning to pursue. As Mr. Clyburn just stated, the team met on February 16th, and under his guidance, we will be presenting the projects that I've presented to you today, the 2 engineering stormwater projects, the 1 Augusta Utilities project, as well as the Emergency Operations Center for the Augusta Fire Department. So that is 4 projects in total. We appreciate any support that you are able to offer. I will be coming to you either individually or as a whole for any support letters, as Mr. Clyburn mentioned as well. We will also be seeking support letters from other members throughout the community, just as we have done in the past. It is important for us to present to our senators that these projects have the full support of the community and not just of our governing body. So as you are out and about, please make sure that you speak them up and continue to put Augusta's foot best forward, and we would appreciate that. And we're also available for any questions that you may have concerning this process.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. Mr. Clyburn, thank you. I have one commissioner in the queue, Commissioner from the 4th, Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Administrator. Mr. Clyburn, first question is for you. Well, I'll make a statement first before the question. Certainly won't hold against the fact that you're a Georgia Tech and an engineer. We'll just leave that where it is, and we're glad about the experience that you have. It's a little inside joke, nothing personal. But what I will say is this: in terms of your communications with both our senators. What communications, if any, have you had then with our Congressman, Rick Allen?
Great question, and that's something that we're looking at moving forward. So in the prior years, once they stopped those congressional directed spending, and they brought it back up again in 2021, the Republican caucus as a body decided that they were not going to support congressional directed spending or earmarks. Now, some people were saying that, well, since the taxpayer dollars were going up there anyway, let's be in the game so that we can bring some of that money back home. And in 2022, they decided the same thing. However, this year, the Republican conference voted 153 House members that they were going to support the congressional directed spending. So then the issue becomes that if the congressman is going to support that, that's fantastic for you because that's another voice to help bring federal dollars to critical infrastructure. And so that's where the communication and the community and the congressional staff and the commission staff come together to help to advocate for that. So that'd be fantastic if there's another congressional member of your delegation that would support that.
Well, we certainly hope that we can get some support from our congressional representative on any number of things. Specifically, and I did not hear this, I'm not sure if it's just not a part of it or not, but the veteran cemetery that we're trying to establish here in Augusta, Richmond County, how familiar are you with that, and if there have been any discussions that you know of in terms of any potential financing from the federal side?
Right. So I've seen a couple of emails about that. That has not been our focus. Our focus has been on the infrastructure and projects like the Emergency Operating Center. But I do know that there are some dynamics between how the program works for the cemetery and making sure that they have a matrix on how they decide on what programs or what cemeteries are going to get funded. And I know that they were working through that process, but both Senate offices, as I remember, were engaged in trying to be responsive to that effort. But it's not something that's going to be a quick fix.
No, it's not going to be a quick fix. Did you have something to add to that, Mr. Mayor, Madam Clerk? I mean, Madam Administrator.
I did, Commissioner Mason. I wanted to let you know that while this project has been discussed with both Senator Ossoff as well as Senator Warnock's office, it was not considered a shovel-ready project. And so for that reason did not make the final cut, just as, say, for instance, our transit project did not make the final cut, but it was considered.
Okay. I'm wondering. I mean, the property has been identified. What is the? Maybe I just need a better understanding of what's the definition of shovel ready.
So, in speaking with Mr. Clark when we met, the presentation that he also gave to this body outlined additional needs. One, a lack of funding, and two, a lack of support, if I was correct, from other entities, not just the city of Augusta. As Mr. Clyburn just stated, there's a listing concerning what cemeteries are funded from a federal level and so on and so forth. So for that reason, it was not considered shovel ready. All of the planning details that would be needed to complete an application were not available.
So is this to say that there is not an ear available to listen to the need that we have here in Augusta Richmond County? And I know, as you know, I'm on that so-called committee there, and we're number 20 on the list. And I know that they're dealing with more with expansion as far as cemeteries than they are with new projects. And so from my understanding, I don't have my package here, but we're number 20 on the list somewhere here previously. But this has been going on, from my understanding, for about 3 years. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get the ear of those, especially those that are in a position to, well, let's just face it, right now the Republicans have the power. And if we're not having conversations, we certainly will never get the type of answers or even attention that we need to even know that this is something that we're looking at doing. Like I said, I don't know how far any conversations, if any, have been had with Congressman Allen. He's the one that sits on that side. He is our representative, good, bad, or indifferent, for our community. And it will be very important from my standpoint for our lobbyists to help engage in that process in some way, shape, or fashion, so that you can get some sort of feel for where he stands on that, and perhaps some insight as to what he may be able to do. I mean, I'm not in D.C., so I don't know how all that works. But you know, if there's any way possible that anything can be introduced or what have you, I don't know. And so that's what I'm hoping, that perhaps yourself or someone, you know, that can work that part for us, because we're gonna need that assistance in having that conversation.
Yeah, by all means, if this is a priority for the commission and the staff, then once I know that, I'm going to be in D.C. next week. We can stop by the office. Having communication with the commission and the congressman's office, and continued communication with the senator's offices, then we'll just get all the information that we can get from them as to where the process stands and what needs to happen to move forward. There is a state process to it, and the local piece.
Sure.
So they'll be working in conjunction with that.
Sure, and like I said, I'm not sure. I know we haven't had you on long, but there's been all types of conversations. The state's committed $1 million. This commission has made it a priority well before I even came up here, and has committed certain dollars for demolition and insurance as far as the roadway. So I'm not sure where the potential disconnect is in terms of whether this is a priority for the commission. That was done before I ever even got up here, so that was made a priority some time ago. I don't know, maybe somebody else can speak to how long ago that was, but I know that was made a priority and has been a priority. And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music in terms of communication, because lack of communication means lack of results. And having communication does not guarantee results, but it does at least know that we had communication, and we can see where a possible disconnect could be.
Yeah, and the emails are clear about Warnock's office and Ossoff's office being involved. But yeah, like to your point, the process is a multi-pronged process. So the federal involvement in the office, in your congressional offices, and our attention to it has been there. Just have to keep working that, because the answer is all put together in terms of those three prongs.
And Commissioner Mason, concerning the priority of this body, earlier in the year, this body voted that the Veterans Cemetery was a priority, and as a result, that communication was forwarded to our state lobbyist, Holland and Knight, via memorandum. So yes, it is a priority. It has been deemed a priority, and conversations are being had surrounding that matter, but it just was not considered a shovel-ready project. As you just indicated, it was number 20 on the list. And so because of that being a reason, it was not deemed ready for application. But I'll be more than happy to follow up with you, as well as Mr. Clark, again, just to see where we are and has anything changed within the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 10th, Commissioner Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Clyburn, thank you for being before us. Thank you for fighting for us here in Augusta, Richmond County. I see that you represent the Coliseum Board as well as the city of Aiken.
Yes, sir.
Great. So is it I do concur with Commissioner Mason as far as the Veterans Cemetery. It's been going on for quite some time with Fort Gordon being here. My father retired, passed away quite some time ago. It would have been nice if he would have been laid to rest in a Veterans, and a good friend of mine was laid in Millersville, and I never could figure out why. But when Mr. Clark came before us, and it was everything's within the 75-mile radius, the closest one is where you get buried at, and that's a long ways to go to go pay respect to your father that's laid in a cemetery 75 miles. And so with us having the land and right here available on Tobacco Road, I think it'll be a good asset to have. As far as the 20th in the list, from what Mr. Clark was saying, I think that's based off of population or amount of veterans within the area is how they determine that. As far as shovel-ready projects, you know, my whole thing is what we see and what the citizens needs most is infrastructure, whether it's roads being repaved, sewage, water, etc. And with our engineering here, our utilities, is that something that could be made a priority? Or interim administrator?
Sure, Commissioner Guilfoyle, it is a priority, hence the reason why I gave you all the listing earlier, which includes those infrastructure projects that have already been deemed valuable, and not only a priority to this body, but also our senators. Those projects have plagued cities like Augusta, and very similar to our infrastructure that is aging, in which our government is challenged in funding them. So they are definitely on top of the list. And as I stated, even the engineering project that we applied for last year that was not funded, it's going right back in the hopper. We've made some tweaks to improve it slightly. But yes, infrastructure-related projects continue to be a priority, which has been communicated by this body to Mr. Clyburn and his consulting agency, as well as our senators on the state side.
Is, Madam Administrator, anything on the lock and dam on this list whatsoever?
No, sir.
Is there anything we could do for the lock and dam, or Mr. Clyburn reach out to this representative so we could get this issue at hand? It's been going on for 5-6 years now. I might be speaking out of turn, or.
So, Commissioner Guilfoyle, I have not had any conversation concerning the lock and dam project. I know it's one that has historically been discussed with this body, but I have not had any conversations to be able to speak to you about its current status, or even received any direction from this body as to how you would like for me to proceed regarding it. So for that reason, it was not even considered a priority.
Thank you, Ms. Interim Administrator.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair now recognizes the Commissioner from the 5th, Commissioner Williams.
You said that right, from the 5th. The 5th. Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Clyburn and Madam Administrator, what projects does the $12 million cover?
Okay, yeah. So in regards to the $12 million, that's over a 2-year period. And what we see is that there had the Travis Boykin dealing with the water sewer. So you have several communities in the Augusta and Richmond County area that are still on septic tanks. And then even some of those that are not on septic tanks, you have a lot of overflow in the I with when the water overflows in the wastewater. And so we had 4 projects that were dealing with the water quality. So the majority of the funding that you all received were for water quality projects. In those projects, we have a list that are in the January 5th memo from those 2-year period. My recommendation was that we continue to deal with the dearth of water quality in some of your communities, and if there's an opportunity to bring more projects to bear, understanding that when you're doing these federal appropriations, it's less than 10% of the funding that goes to these appropriations. You're already up against a very high level like Hail Marys, but the reason that those Hail Marys came through for Augusta Richmond County is because this collaboration here where we actually made the case that in 2021, in 2022, and 2023, you still have people who are on septic tanks, you still have people who have water quality issues, and that resonated with your senator's congressional office. And it's not just the senator's offices that determine it, it resonated with the Senate appropriators about those water quality projects.
Okay, I got you. And
Commissioner Williams, I wanted to give you some additional specifics surrounding the $12 million that you asked for. As Mr. Clyburn just stated, the Travis Boykin Road sewer and water line replacement project was about $3.9 million. The Rock Creek Basin at National Hills neighborhood, which was a drainage project, was funded at $3.2 million. We received $4 million for storm and sewer improvements and an additional $1 million for a water line evaluation project. Those 4 projects total about $12 million.
Okay, that's good. But I want to ask you, they've been talking a lot about appropriating money for infrastructure in cities and so forth, or what have you. Is there any monies that they will give the city and allow the city to decide? So let's say if they got $4 million hanging out there that they can give to the city, and when it gets to the city, we can decide where we want that money to go. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so there are some new legislation like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan and the EJA, which deals with infrastructure, where some programs are going to be coming out, and it depends on what type of project it is. Now, one of the important pieces, even with this dynamic, if you're going to do a road project, you're not going to get the federal funding through this appropriations process unless it's on the TIP or the STIP. And the same thing with the water quality project. It needs to be on the state's water priority plan. But if it's not on the state's water priority plan, if it's eligible for the state revolving fund, then the city will be able to utilize those fundings. And so there is a dynamic where we're looking at the appropriations process, but we also be looking at the bipartisan infrastructure bills so that we can see if there's any more money that can come. And some of it may have to be loans that can be repaid or be forgiven, but we're looking at outright grants is our first priority.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the commissioner from the first, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is to our administrator. I believe that you said that we had some requests for transit and they didn't make the cut. Is that what we said? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. The project that I outlined to you was the transfer facility that is located on Broad Street. Although that facility is aging and in need of renovations, because it is not a shovel-ready project, it did not make the cut. And in this case, this project does not have any type of A&E plans available, so we really are not certain exactly what that project needs. And for that reason alone, it was not deemed ready for application. We want to, because this is a very competitive process, we want to make certain that when we present projects on behalf of Augusta, that they are strong, that they are viable, and that when Mr. Clyburn and his team is out advocating for Augusta, that these are projects in which Augusta has skin in the game and that we are ready once funding hits. Because as you know, even though we received funding last year, we have not received the dollars yet, but we definitely want to make certain that when those dollars hits, that it won't be another year or 2 years before the projects get started. So that again is the reason why the transit project did not make the cut. However, we are planning for an application for FY25, which is the reason why the transit team, along with the administrator's office, is pursuing a planning grant. That planning grant will afford us dollars to assist us with the A&E work, architectural and engineering work that is needed on the front end for us to carve out some of those additional needs for that facility.
Got you. And I know we I know we don't want to go around the block on it, but I know at I guess it was one of our budget retreats, we talked about how we really wanted public transit to be a priority of ours, and certainly I know that it is, but I want us to just always, make sure that we remember that we still have an aging fleet that needs to be replaced. Dr. Page and Director Daugherty are doing a great job, and we had Transit Equity Day a few weeks ago, and it was a great experience. But it also highlighted some of the needs that we still have in our public transit system. I mean, they're doing the best that they can. So if we have any opportunity to just replace fleet, or to maintain what we have, or to expand what we can do, I think that we should always keep that at the top of our minds too, because public transit isn't just something that people use just for fun. I mean, it is actually something that folks need to get around town. So I won't dwell on that too long, but I do want to just make sure to just voice that for the record, that public transportation is something that we really need to lean in on, because I think it's one of the jewels in our communities that we haven't polished as best as we possibly could. And it's not because of the director or anything of that nature. It's just funding is always going to be an issue. So if we can keep our eyes on that going forward, I know this is probably not the best opportunity, but final question. Through that federal infrastructure bill, did we receive dollars for transportation through that infrastructure bill, that bipartisan bill?
Yeah, so the bipartisan bill there's not congressional directed spending directly, so it's for the programs. Okay. That's what this appropriations process is for. Okay. And then the city and the state can come through on the general programs from the legislature.
Have we been in touch with our state senators about that? Senator Burns, has he been paying attention to this?
Absolutely. Okay, and so to go back to your first point, while this presentation today is from a federal standpoint concerning those congressionally directed spending dollars, we have been successful, transit in particular, has been successful in receiving grant funding for our electric buses, for other maintenance needs for the facility. And yes, we do understand that it is a priority of this body. If you recall, we back in December purchased 3 buses that have been wrapped, that have been infused in our fleet, that are on the ground today. So I'm certain, I know Commissioner Frantum as well as Commissioner Mason was calling me earlier before about receiving complaints with run times. Those have, I won't say stopped, and I don't have wood to knock on, but yet and still they have definitely decreased. We will be coming back to you shortly in the very near future concerning the other 3 buses that we were going to receive on loan from Athens. But transit is a priority, continues to be a priority. We continue working with our local council for grant opportunities until our grant writer comes on staff. So this is just one avenue for funding, but staff is very active in pursuing multiple avenues for funding and have been very successful in receiving those. We have paratransit buses that are coming that Augusta did not have to pay for. You still have to put gas in them and maintain them, but still, those are dollars infused into our community.
That's great news, and I really appreciate you, Administrator Dowse. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Chair now recognizes the Commissioner from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Ms. Interim Administrator Dowse. The list of priority that you list, are these all new projects? I think that you went down that.
No, ma'am, they are not all new. most of these projects have been projects that have been presented in some way, shape, form, or fashion, just have had funding challenges. But no, ma'am, they are not new projects.
Okay. My second, along those lines, we still have not finished the Hyde Park projects. We still got some work to do there, and it's causing some problems with Wilkerson Garden. I've talked to the engineer, committee chair. I sent a letter to Dr. Malik. We got some serious flooding really all over District 2 and District 9, but I just want to make sure when we do priorities that we make sure we finish the projects that we have on the books that has not been finished.
So the Wilkinson, and Dr. Malik, please be prepared to speak in the event you're needed, but the Wilkinson Gardens Neighborhood Stormwater Sewer Improvements Project was presented last year and not funded. That is part of the project in which we will be repackaging and retooling and will be presented again this year. Dr. Malik nod, is that correct? Thank you. So Commissioner Scott, to that end, yes, it is still considered one in need of funding. You may recall at our budget retreat last year that this project was highlighted with a need for additional funding. Unfortunately, some of these infrastructure projects take so long to complete that the cost of doing business and the cost of goods sold increases, which then causes project overruns and supplemental change orders, which have to be presented. This is definitely one of those cases as well.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the second. Commissioner Pulliam.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Thank you, Madam Administrator. And Mr. Claiborne, thank you so much for being here with us on today. That's very much appreciative. Thank you, Madam Administrator, for explaining how to get the projects to get noticed. But I have a question as far as, Mr. Claiborne, you stated that there was a priority list as far as how the state sees the project. What are the steps in getting the state to recognize this as a priority project? Much like when we were talking about for District 2, that is my district, the flooding issue, it's terrible. And so for me, that's a priority because businesses are being flooded. People have flooding outside of their homes. It's really bad. So I'm looking at that as a priority. What does it take for the state to see that this is a priority?
Yeah, so, and that's more of a question for the state team. However, when you're talking about all of the water infrastructure projects across the state, across the country, everyone has their dynamics and their priorities on the local area. Then the state government has to take a look at all those requests and determine, with all these projects and the limited funds we have, how do we rank how do we prioritize which one? Because once they become on, just typically like the tip, the state has their transportation improvement plan, but localities have their transportation improvement plan also. They bump it up to the state, and then the governing body there determines and has to cherry pick and choose, depending on with all the dynamics. And it's very similar on the federal side, because most of your congressional offices will accept any requests from any of their constituents. But the reality is they can't fund all of them. They only fund a certain number, very few, less than 15 of those projects throughout the state. And so when those projects are being funded, they have to then go to the Senate appropriators, and the Senate appropriators, and I used to be one, will ask, okay, I see your projects, but give me your 1, 2, and 3. And so that's not necessarily public information, but that's information that in terms of the dynamic. And that's why the advocacy is so key and so important to bring out those very points that you're bringing out. And that has to be done on the local level, which you're doing. It has to be bumped up to the state level so that it then gets on the water priority or the transportation and the STIP. And then when I come and look at your priorities, I can take that up to the federal government because they're going to ask me, is it on the STIP? And they're going to ask me, is it on the state revolving fund? Is it eligible? And if it's not, even if we are going to get the money, they won't approve it. And so it all is a dance that includes the local, the state, and the federal, and that's why it's important that I'm here today, because I can hear that, and for the state folks to be here and the locality, because all of them have to be in sync, because all of this, the $12 million we just got through talking about, and just to be clear, if you take a look at the projects, the $3 million, the $3.8 million, the $3.3 million, those are high numbers. Typically you get 500,000 or 1.2 million. And if you get over $1 million, you're very excited and very happy. But because of the deferred maintenance and because of the advocacy, they bumped it up to 3.8, 3.24, 1 million. And so that has to be done on a regular basis, and that's what we're in the process of doing now. So that's a great question, but yeah, there's several prongs and several partners in this dance.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 6th, Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Administrator, Ms. Dallas, I do understand that you've done your due diligence in prioritizing these particular projects, and in doing so, getting with Mr. Clyburn to help us to facilitate trying to get these funds to fund these projects. And my question to you today is, I know we've talked about the various infrastructure projects when it come down to stormwater and things of that nature. Can you give us a insight in detail and chronicling these particular projects? Can you help us to understand what areas that we're talking about these projects lie in, the areas, the districts that they lie in, so we can get a better understanding of these infrastructure needs and how they're going to be done? And my second question to you is this. We know that we're going to be presenting these items to Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff's staff. In the event that these projects are going to cost more than we're going to be able to get or to receive, what do you propose our other funding mechanisms be to complete these when we get the amount that they're going to appropriate for us?
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Your first question or your first request, I would ask if I'd be able to provide this body with that information via email in writing, so you'll be able to refer back to it. I can provide you a brief synopsis of each one of the projects that we've deemed viable for this application period, to include the district and even a mapping of the area that would be affected. I would hope that that would be of value to you as well as this body. Okay, and then the second part of your question was, in the event of a delta as far as a project funded and what is needed to shore up the additional funding. As I stated to Commissioner Scott, because these aren't new projects, some of the projects have some funding, just not all to cover the entirety of the project. And as a result, any funding that we receive would be of benefit to a project that is already on the books, such as the Wilkinson Gardens project or the Emergency Operations Center or even the Water Canal infrastructure improvement. So while the funding, we are not expecting it to make us whole, I will include what funding is currently available and what this body has committed, as well as the amount that we will be applying for with the hopes to receive, and then any delta that may be present.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Clyburn, from us as a body, what can we do to ensure the success rate of your efforts with us? What can we be doing collectively to make sure that we're helping you?
That's a great question, and it goes to the heart of why you've been successful thus far. Just to be clear, it's not just a phone call and just to show up. It's great that I know the staff and that I've met the senators. It's great that I'm from the CSRA and from Georgia, Georgia Tech, but even though Senator Miller didn't like that so much. But what's really important is a whole list of dynamics. One, this meeting here, what are the priorities? And then once we have the priorities, how do we get the community to speak up for those priorities? Because that message needs to be clear to Washington, D.C. They have 1,000 different issues, and they love and care for everybody, but everybody's not going to get all the attention at the same time. What can we do to highlight and to bolster those real needs that we see on the front line? And they want to be helpful, and we help them to see that by making that message. So the people that you know in the community that can write a letter, whether it's the Chamber or the Economic Development Alliance, or whether it's a particular community group, that is very helpful, particularly when it comes from you. Then when the interim administrator and her team gets that and puts that in the portal, then I can go to work and really go with a strong message. And so having everybody together, whether it's the commission, the staff, and the congressional offices, that is what's going to really help to make this happen. And if you take a look at the numbers, and if you take a look at other cities and other states, you can see how well Augusta Richmond County has done, and it's been because we've been able to connect the dots and connect the people. And so continuing that with the team that you have that's been very responsive, that's why we've been able to meet the deadlines when they have a quick turnaround, March 7th and March 10th. We got to get moving, but they've already gotten moving, and we've already had those conversations. And then putting it into portal and getting the deadline date is not the end of the story. Then you have to have the letters, and then you have to have some phone calls and making sure that they know that how much of a priority it is. So it's that constant, continual massaging of how important this is, and that's why we've been able to be so successful for you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Administrator.
Mayor Johnson and Augusta Commissioners, in closing, I would like to thank Mr. Clyburn for his time. He has shown us yeoman's efforts. Last year, he was able to assist us with inputting applications in a very short time frame, especially with the transition from one administrator to another. So I appreciate the time that he has spent today coming to speak with this body so you all can express to him directly what your concerns are. Thank you for your time, and that concludes this presentation.
Thank you. Madam Administrator, I have one further.
Thank you, Mr. Clyburn. I wanted to let you know that you're not the only one in here that's a Tech fan. Everybody else up here is Georgia, but I'm a Tech fan, so I'm with you. Thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Clyburn, again, thank you so much, and safe travels. And this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much. All right. So this meeting is now called to order. I'm going to go ahead and Mr. Widener. Director Vassar, you guys ready? All right, let's go. Thank y'all.
Good afternoon, everyone. You see me every week, so I have a wonderful group of staff that are going to speak with you today. I'm going to help them field questions, so we'll jump right in. I know it's slated for 2 hours, but we're going to try to value your time and make sure we get to the question and answer session as fast as possible. Thank you, and I'll start with our Deputy Director.
Good afternoon. My name is Shavante Vassar. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Development. I'm honored to be here today to be a part of Augusta, Georgia, and its growth. I grew up here. I've been a part of this community all my life. So I've seen South Augusta ups, downs, and in between as far as growth is concerned. So I'm pleased to be working for the city of Augusta and watching the transformation continue in a positive direction. So enough about myself. The purpose of this work session is to inform the community and elected officials the roles of code enforcement, the useful tools we have, what we can and cannot do according to the law, challenges we face each day, and potential solutions to increase compliance amongst the community. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my team. The manager, Mr. Terrence Weiner, my supervisor, Ms. Donna Tyra, and my senior code enforcement officer, Mrs. Brandy Palmer. So before we get started, I would just like you guys to hold your questions. If you can, I understand. We're gonna have 2 Q&As for you guys throughout the meeting. And we're gonna, at the end, we're going to have a round table discussion. All right, Terrence, you can begin.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. For those of you who do not know who I am, because I know we got some new commissioners, my name is Terrence Winder. I'm the Code Enforcement Manager. My job is to manage the day-to-day operations of the Code Enforcement Division. So we got about 24 slides today, so be patient with us, please. I know that's a lot. The first segment, we're going to talk about Code Enforcement 101. Is our basic code enforcement at a low level. During this segment, we will discuss our division makeup, the role of code enforcement, ordinances that we enforce, our process, and common code enforcement violations. I'm sorry about that. Can everybody hear me now? All right. Division makeup and jurisdiction. Currently, we have 9 code enforcement inspectors with 2 vacancies open, 3 administrative staff, 1 code enforcement supervisor, and myself, 1 code enforcement manager. The slide that you're looking at, the picture that you're looking at on the right-hand side is our inspector areas. When you look at the green, that is South Augusta. When you look at the brown at the top, that's our part of West Augusta. We do not enforce in city limits of Healdsburg, city limits of Blythe, and Fort Gordon. We have 10 inspector areas. Currently, 1 area is vacant and it's being handled by the supervisor until we can fill those positions. Code enforcement parameters. This slide just talks about the number of residents, acres, parcels, and overall, 95% of the parcels are in compliance. Some 2022 statistics. Last year, 3,794 new cases. We did 7,689 inspections. Most cases is going to have multiple inspections. You'll have your initial inspection. You'll have a re-inspection when you go back out to see if the property is in compliance. If we were to give a continuance, you would have another re-inspection. This also includes personal care home inspections, environmental inspections, and demolition inspections. 2014 notices were generated. 114 homeowner demolitions. Now, that might not seem like a big number, but that is a big deal to us. If you multiply each structure by 7,500, give or take, some can be less than 7,500 to tear down, some could be more. That's roughly $855,000 that the city did not have to pay for if we were to go through nuisance abatement court to have the city tear it down. 113 building permits were issued, not total, but the ones that code enforcement sent out a violation notice and had that owner to get a permit. Our caseload, we talked about the cases that we had on the previous screen. 3,324 cases were all in a residential area. So that's who we dealing with the most. We dealing with those property owners, we dealing with those occupants. 459 of the cases that we dealt with last year were in a commercial location. Code enforcement basics. For starters, what's code enforcement? Code enforcement, we administer the property maintenance code and various local ordinances, investigate complaints to see if they're in violation or not. But our end goal is to gain compliance through education. Whenever you have good code enforcement, there are outcomes: economic development, neighborhood beautification, property values go up, more accurate tax appraisals, and the decrease in crime rate. What's on the books? So this is just a snapshot of the ordinances that are under our purview. The first three on the left, those are the ones that we have the most violations under: property maintenance code, nuisance code, and the zoning ordinance. We'll talk a little bit more about those ordinances in the upcoming slides. The state nuisance code is basically the city has adopted the state nuisance code procedures, and those procedures we follow when we go to nuisance abatement court. International Property Maintenance Code. The International Property Maintenance Code is an adopted code. It's also an optional code, which means that the city does not have to have this code. This is a code that we opted into. 39% of the cases that we have or had last year came from this code. It establishes the minimum requirements for property maintenance on existing buildings only. Code enforcement does not enforce on new development, new construction. It also determines who's responsible. What is the owner responsible for versus what is the tenant responsible for? Key responsibilities under this code would be tenant complaints, unsafe structures, unlawful structures, and condemnations of buildings. That's just to say the least. The nuisance ordinance. 31% of our cases last year came under the nuisance ordinance. What is the nuisance ordinance? It is another local code that defines what a nuisance is. Anytime we send a notice out under this code, the violator will get 10 days to comply. Common violations under the nuisance code would be overgrown grass, trash and debris, noxious odors, dead or hazardous trees. And lastly, there's the zoning ordinance. 3% of the cases last year came out of the zoning ordinance. And some people may not know what the zoning ordinance is. The zoning ordinance is it can get a little tricky. It determines how property and land can be used. And common violations under the zoning ordinance would be illegal fence height, vehicle repair in an unauthorized zone, that's working on cars in a residential area, or illegal use of a recreational vehicle, living in a camper in a residential area. Illegal signs, whether it's on the right-of-way or private property. Boarding and personal care homes. I know I talked a little bit about what does code enforcement handle, but now we get to what does code enforcement not handle, and this is just for starters. Anytime we get a complaint of anything on this list, we don't turn a blind eye to it. We will route the call to where it needs to be. Lease agreements, neighborhood covenants, illegal dumping, inoperative junk vehicles, roadway hazards, overgrown vacant lot cutting, crime, noise, loitering, panhandling, property line disputes, trash can replacements, just to say a few. Now, here's the code enforcement non-compliance process. This is a basic process. It can get It can go everywhere depending on if the owner or the tenant is somewhat making strides to comply. I'm going to have Donna Tower, the code enforcement supervisor, come up and explain our basic code enforcement process.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I would like to discuss our basic code enforcement process. Code enforcement receives complaints from many different entities such as the coroner, sheriff's department, marshal's office, engineering, 311, to name a few, and our citizens. We receive complaints by phone call, email, and field observation. Once the complaint is entered into the database, an initial inspection is generated. The inspector has 3 business days to inspect the issue depending on the severity of the complaint. If violations are found, a notice of violation letter will be generated and mailed. Due process would be 10 days or 30 days depending on the type of code the violation is under and the method of delivery, which could be certified, hand delivery, or returned mail. The time frame for compliance begins once proof of service is obtained. Next, the reinspection. If the property is in compliance, of course, code enforcement is going to close out the case. If progress is being made, an extension will be given. If the property is not in compliance and no work has been done, a citation can be issued and a court hearing will take place. The majority of our court cases result in compliance even before we attend court. Some of the cases, the violator will ask for a continuance, a bench trial, or a jury trial, which is sent up to state court. The outcome of the case can result in 60 days in jail per violation, fine up to $1,000 per violation, and or probation. If the violator goes to jail, the violations may not be resolved. Code enforcement does not close out their case until the violations are corrected. Terrence will speak more on this in the upcoming slide, Code Enforcement Challenges. Thank you all.
So at this time, we will start to let you guys answer a few questions. Can you please keep it at least probably about 10 minutes before we can keep going through this? But we understand, though.
All right, thank you, sir. We're going to start with the first person in the queue, Commissioner Mason from the 4th.
Well, I see protocol has been established. However, just a couple things. One, I would like to, once this is all said and done, that this PowerPoint be given to our clerk for dissemination to us as a commission. I think would be useful as we try to explain a lot of things that go on with our constituents and how to properly utilize code enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Okay, number 2, you didn't think you were getting off that easy, did you?
No,
okay.
I didn't think that.
Number 2, I saw something about 2 vacancies as far as code enforcement inspectors. Is that correct? Yes, sir. What, if anything, is being done, or what are the challenges that you're having filling that?
Yeah. Well, what we're finding out is that, I'm going to be honest with you guys.
Well, that's what we want.
It's the entry salary is not that attractive. So we're having a hard time getting people to come in because it's so low. But that seems to be one of the issues where we're facing.
And just curious, I mean, is 9 inspectors for what I'm seeing you all responsible for? Is that really a legitimate number in the first place to be able to handle adequately?
It is not. But you also got to think, we got a growing population. Even in your district, you got new buildings being built right now. So we have a growing.
Well, we got to hold on a couple. That's neither here nor there. Go ahead.
Okay. No, it's not.
Yeah, no.
So to answer your question, no, it's not. We got 2 vacancies, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in the next part of this PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 7th.
I'm going to hold.
Hold. Commissioner from the 5th, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, sir. I know you only have about 3 minutes left. You mentioned something. Did you mention panhandling?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So what is it that you all do with panhandling?
We don't. That was on the slide where it said, what does code enforcement not handle?
Okay,
So we don't deal with panhandling. That would be law enforcement.
I got you. I must have been walking out when you were saying.
Probably so.
Okay, well, that's all I had, sir.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 10th. Commissioner
Thank you,
Villaflor.
Mr. Mayor. Manager Terrence, do you have handouts from what you presenting right now? Because it would help us out in order to write questions. You doing your screen, but did y'all take in consideration of handouts for the commissioners and the administrator?
Yes. Okay, we'll print. I'll get my staff to print it real quick. I thought y'all were seeing it. I'm sorry.
We see it, but we can't write.
I'm just saving it to the desktop. Yeah, I'm saving it to the desktop so you can keep going.
Yeah, I saved it already.
To the desktop? Okay.
I don't know.
All right, Madam Administrator.
Mayor Johnson, while they are working out those additional details, I did want to point out to this body as well as to the public that is present today that we do have some of our community partners here because this code enforcement matter does span more than just our local government. We have Mr. Benish Brown from Destination Augusta as well as representatives from our marshal's office because, as you know, they are partners as far as code compliance and code enforcement is concerned.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. Thank you guys for being here.
Let me get us back to it.
Are you? All right, team. Commissioner from the 10th, is it okay to be emailed or do you need a printed copy now?
We'll get you printed copies. Don't worry about it. We'll get you printed copies.
All right.
I do want to ask a question about panhandling.
Hey, calm down. Mr. Widener, are you ready, sir?
Can I ask one question?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, he brought it up, so I was going to save it. If the panhandling ordinance is brought back, since our neighboring county put one in just this week, a panhandling ordinance, and I think that we need to look at this again, would that go through your department, or who would that go through?
No, that would be law enforcement.
Sheriff's office, is that what you're saying? That's who we need to go through?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Widener, you're up, sir.
Mayor Johnson, before Mr. Widener proceeds, I would like the marshal to weigh in on your question to offer some specifics surrounding panhandling.
All right.
Marshal Lampkin.
I was just going to add that Supreme Court has issued a ruling, and so there's nothing we can do to enforce it here. I don't know what ordinance that they came up with in another jurisdiction, but you'd be violating Supreme Court ruling by doing it, so I don't advise that action.
Well, I'll make sure that I get a copy of what Columbia County just did, because they just approved it this Tuesday, and I saw it all in the news. So,
Okay. Well,
So, Marshal, to be clear, there's nothing that we can do to enforce panhandling.
No, they can be on the street. They can step. As long as they don't step out in the roadway, they can do it all day long. The Supreme Court has ruled on it. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. So that's why we don't bother them now, because we used to arrest them. We used to issue citations for it. But since that Supreme Court ruling came, we couldn't enforce it anymore.
Has there been any communication about this? How we can get this out to the public so we don't receive as many calls? Has there been perhaps?
There hasn't been anything. However, I can have our public information manager create some social media marketing as well as just some additional information so the public can be aware, as well as I've also seen in other jurisdictions some tips on how to handle panhandlers.
Okay.
And I will add this too. We do take a step. Even though we can't write citations, we do try and find help for them if they did showers and different things for them. So we do try and assist them as we can, but we just can't take an enforcement action against them.
Thank you, Marshal. Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 5th.
Hey, Mr. Marshall. I just want to ask Marshall a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Commissioner.
you and I talked about it somewhat. We need to officially do something. Trash cans, just left all over the place. You know, trash is being picked up on Wednesday. The trash cans still out there on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and what have you. Do you have any suggestion as to what we need to do to get a little bit better at that? Do we need to talk to the judges and just have a ticket, a day we just give out tickets or what have you, and that ticket automatically goes to the court, or what do you suggest? Because I'm getting bombarded with those calls all the time, and I see it quite often.
Well, normally in that instance, environmental services handles it. They send out notices for people that leaving the trash cans out. Now, if it becomes a chronic problem, we will go out, but I prefer to take our resources to do them to more serious problems than trash cans. If it's something that the will of the body and you're willing to fund more people for me to do it, then I'll be happy to do it.
You already got 300 or 400 over there, don't you?
No, sir, we do not.
But it is a problem. So you're saying you think we need to go through environmental services and they go out and give the notices, but when do you go out to give a ticket?
When environmental services request it, then we go out and issue the citation. If it's become a chronic problem over and over again, maybe it's something we can work with the court system to maybe increase the fines or something like that. But normally environmental services, they ask us to issue a ticket and we go out and write a ticket then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 8th, Commissioner Garrett.
Thank you. This question is for, I guess, Terrence, if he's available. Looking at some of the statistics that you shared earlier with the thousands of inspections that you did last year and all the different visits that you guys made, I know that a lot of times, just as the marshal just indicated, that they step in alongside of you as well as helping the with trash cans and everything else. So is there a system that you all share that helps communication between all those departments? I know that a lot of the departments out there use CityWorks. I'm not sure what you guys use.
We use City View. The marshal's office use CityWorks. So the only communication is through email or phone call at this time. But I do have a slide in the forthcoming PowerPoint that I will address kind of that topic.
Is this another 24-page?
No, so we already did about, I would say 10 slides. So we still got about 12, 13 to go.
Okay, well, I will pause there and we'll come back and revisit this question.
All right.
All right, Mr. Widener, let's roll.
All right, let's go. Gaining compliance. That's a tough situation, right? Some people don't care about the labor pains. All they want to see is the baby. Talking to my wife the other day, she didn't care nothing about this meeting I had in front of y'all. All she want to know is when that check is going to come through, right? Some people don't care about the challenges that we face day to day. All they care is about that end result, right? So I'm going to go through some of our challenges that we have. Staffing. Like we talked about earlier, the entry-level salary for a code enforcement inspector is $37,500. Over the last year, I lost 3 inspectors. All went for more paying jobs. Over the last 2 years, I lost 5 inspectors, and they all left for the same reason. Last year, I interviewed 2. One of them accepted the job, but when it was time to show up for orientation, we got an email day of. The other one, when we sent the offer, he declined. It's all pay. Legal system limitations. We may go to court, they may ask for a jury trial. That case is going to be transferred to state court. 9 times out of 10, it may not ever be heard. It's still in court now. Maintaining compliance. Commissioner Johnson, one day they may be in compliance. The next week or the next month, they back out of compliance. Resources. People got to understand that everybody do not have the funds to meet minimum standards. They don't. I know we have an HCD department. HCD is doing all they can. Where are the resources? I get a call from the commissioners, why aren't we doing anything? Well, they just don't have the money. We looking. Out-of-town owners on rental property. Building permit status. We'll talk about that a little in the PowerPoint. Compatible ordinances. Tax sale. Transfer of property. Anytime a tax sale comes, they got over a year. Our code says that when the property is transferred or sold, individual to individual, we got to start our case over. Properties awaiting demolition. We still got over 300 properties waiting to be torn down. Ordinance comparison. This is what I kind of touched on, Commissioner Garrett, when you kind of talked about systems and all that, right? So, and this is not a knock to either department. This is just how the ordinance reads. You got two different ordinances. Both of them have litter. Both of them are enforced by two different entities. Code enforcement is on the left, marshal's office is on the right. Who takes the call? We may have a case on it, the marshal's office may come and put the same case on it, or vice versa. It's an issue. What do? Do we revise the ordinance? Do we draw in the sand a demarcation line and say, code enforcement, you're gonna handle residential, marshals, you're gonna handle commercial? Think about it. These are ordinance review. These are some of the ordinances we have on the books right now that give us quote unquote heartburn. When you get a building permit, you have 6 months. They give you 6 months to start work. Once you start the work, there's no time frame for an inspection, for them to call in an inspection. We have to send out certified mail, and sometimes the post office is 45 days behind before we know if they received it or not. They also get 20 days to appeal our violation notice, which means that we can't enforce until that time frame has expired. And I talked about this one before, the transfer of property delays maintenance. Do you guys want to move forward, or do you want to ask questions about what I just presented?
Colleagues, you're right. Commissioner from EA.
So we'll pick up back in the shared system. So how many duplicates are there out there when you're talking about cases dealing with, you just showed, just one policy or ordinance out there in regards to who handles litter. Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of overlap out there, so how do you handle that?
So I can't give you a number of how many duplicates. What I'm telling the commission is it happens. What do we do? That's what we want to collaborate with you all about. I'm just letting the commissioners know that there's two ordinances, two different entities are enforcing these separate ordinances. How do we demarcate who's doing what?
All right. So,
but I know what you're getting at. You're getting at the system, correct?
I'm just trying to figure out how to make sure everybody's on the same page. I know when I first came on board 4 years ago, I sat through a couple classes on CityWorks talking about how this was supposed to bring all the departments together so everybody was on the same page and everybody was working from the same table, basically. So you also mentioned something about the court system and the issues there. You said that something will go to state court and never get heard. Why is that?
And maybe I need to change my wording on that part.
No, I think
I want to use the word not ever, very seldom.
Why is that?
Very seldomly getting heard. That would be a question for, I believe, legal to be able to help me out on that part.
No, I mean, you see it every day. Help me out. I mean, I think a lot of us up here are probably surprised by hearing that. So, I mean, be frank.
So once a case goes to state court, essentially what happens is or jury trial is requested, the docket is full. So you're waiting a very, very long time. We have cases that have been heard in as little as 6 months and cases that are 8 years old, depending on the condition of the property owner. Say, for instance, they're ill. It's been transferred a couple of times. Most of the time, when we go to when a case goes to state court, we're looking at 3 years before anything is done because we can't enforce anything with the state court process.
So are we basically saying that we have no way to put teeth into any of our actions?
Okay. So, I'm sorry, attorney was advising us. Amica law makes the...
Amica Loggins?
So when a matter gets transferred to state court, the prosecutor of state court, that is Solicitor General Amica Loggins, is a different elected official who makes the prosecutorial decisions to go forward with those matters on the docket with all the other traffic, DUI, other misdemeanors in that on the state court, and state court is backed up for years. And so once it's transferred to state court, we no longer have jurisdiction to make prosecutorial decisions regarding those matters. That would be Solicitor General Amica Loggins who makes those calls.
Commissioner Garrett. You
I
good?
have no words.
All right. Commissioner from the 7th and Commissioner
Thank you,
Franklin.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, what is it going to take to get code and the Marshals Department on the same system and on CityWorks? Like, who needs to make that decision? Why are we not making that decision?
Well, as a department, the goal and objectives are different a little bit here. With regards to CityWorks, CityWorks is not designed, and I have gone through several trainings, it does not meet our needs for code enforcement. Code enforcement and code compliance, the needs are met through the CityView system. CityView is tied into our building permits and our zoning. So as all of these systems communicate, if a person comes in and they ask for rezoning on a property, we can look and see, oh, there's a code enforcement case, there's a business license case. If we pull it out, now we lose the communication internally amongst 5 sectors in planning and development. So the information is not readily available to us. In looking at the module for code enforcement with CityWorks, I sat down and they talked about customizing it. The out-of-the-box version does not do what we need it to do. So when I talked about how much it would cost to customize it, what it would take to customize it, and I had them do a demo for me just for code enforcement, they couldn't do what I needed done. And they couldn't capture the data that we needed with CityWorks. They said, well, we'll get back to you. You guys have more cases than some of our other customers and things of that nature. So they were unable in the demonstration portion of CityWorks to show us how they could make code enforcement better.
But you have rights to CityWorks.
I use CityWorks in our plans repository, yes,
Okay.
for site plan review.
Okay, thank you.
So we do know CityWorks, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let me chime in on that CityWorks. So the CityWorks is a conduit for the Marshals Department, Sheriff's Department, and our court system, as well as our government. Is that be correct?
I can't speak for the court system, but there are several departments that do use CityWorks. No department has wholeheartedly embraced it. There are elements that we use, and then we piecemeal it to other systems. Because, again, when you use CityWorks, outside of the utilities realm and the engineering realm, it is a work order program. Okay. And these are not work orders.
But more people use CityWorks within the departments than not.
I couldn't attest to that for sure. No.
So let's say the code enforcement. So basically, you're on an island by yourself with your means of communication. It's either done through emails or phone. Would that be correct to say if you need to get in contact with marshals, the sheriffs, or even for the court system?
No, I don't think that would be correct to say.
Then what?
Because we have a different goal and objective. Our goal and our objective is code compliance. Our goal and our objective is to make sure that the communication is succinct and that we draw a line between what is a code enforcement case and what is a marshal's case. And that is accomplished. So we are not on an island. We are definitely doing what we are supposed to be doing in using the system.
So your biggest challenge is determining whether it's a marshal's or a code enforcement case.
I would say to give it a little bit more context, we have about 3 or 4 cases per quarter where there's overlap. That's not, there's no grand problem here. 3 times 4, you're talking 12 cases a year where there's potential overlap. And here's the thing, if it's sitting in the system in a database, you still need to pick up the phone and call somebody. You still need to talk to people. A lot of times we're relying on email instead of talking. And so that communication, the database to me is not the communication effort, it's a warehouse.
Well, just for the, I'm sitting here and listening to the manager Terrence speaking and his challenges that he's facing. You know, we put people in positions, whether they directors or et cetera. Their job is to find solutions, not, you know, continue throwing up the problems. We need answers. We need to find ways of resolving it. But will it be better if the code enforcement went underneath the marshal so it's working under one house instead of two separate houses?
In my estimation, I would say no. If you want to criminalize people who can't afford to keep their properties up, then you could move it under law enforcement. But the reality of it is 3,000 of your cases, your constituents would be criminalized. Right. And so not being able to keep your property up, no, I would not recommend that they be joined. That is the general feeling from the public. When we talk to the public, that's the fear. They, you know, now I've got a cop walking up to my house, and now there's this feeling of threat. And so we're removing that, and we're working very hard in the community. So no, I don't think it would be best.
If a cop walks, police officer, not a cop, police officer walk up to my house, he's going to have my ultimate attention and respect. So I don't know where you're going with that statement. I'd rather see a person in uniform. They automatically deserve the respect because they earned it, number one. Less challenges once you got that respect and attention from an officer or a fireman or...
We'll put our people in a uniform.
I'm sorry?
We will put our people in a uniform. They already have a badge.
Right, and I guess they're not required to wear bulletproof vests, is that correct?
They do have a Kevlar vest. All of them have one, yes.
Are they required to wear it?
Yes, they do. When they go in the field, if they're walking into the building, lunch, they don't have to wear it, but yes.
Okay, and can I have your name?
Carla Delaney.
Okay, Ms. Delaney, okay.
Madam Administrator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. I wanted to point out two things. One, environmental services is also a key player when it comes to matters such as litter and, as we've already stated, the trash cans being left out. They are on a separate system, so they too are not in CityWorks. They work out of a system called Elamos. And the second matter is this body tasks my office, myself, with coming up with a right-sizing plan of which we are identifying efforts of duplication. So that will be included in the presentation that will be presented to you because we are already outlining areas in which services are being duplicated throughout our government.
Thank you, Madam. Chair now recognizes the Commissioner from the first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see that we have some revision ideas coming up in the next slide, so I'm gonna hold some of my questions for there, but I did want to, you know, we talk a lot about enforcement from a law enforcement's perspective, and I don't really know if the marshal's office versus code enforcement, versus this department is the right conversation to have now. Certainly, I know we've had that conversation. I've had it with a few folks. Mr. Guilfoyle says that he's not sure why that wouldn't get folks' attention, but you know, on some sides of town, it just don't work that way. We know that. You're not going to come down to East Augusta or Laney Walker, anywhere like that, with a gun on your hip, looking like a police officer telling somebody to do something on their property. It don't work that way. You're asking for an issue, and so what I'm hoping we'll do is we'll take this as an opportunity to not focus so much on enforcing the law from a policing standpoint, although we know that our police are needed. But Terrence, you mentioned the resources. I mean, when we're talking about senior citizens who are potentially getting fined for not keeping their grass cut, well, my 80-year-old grandmother can't go cut her grass, right? So I hope in this revision section that we'll have an opportunity to talk about, you know, some ways to get around that, some ways to put some funds into some type of program to help folks. Because really, I mean, for instance, we're closing down a lot of public housing. Dogwood Terrace, Gilbert Manor, all these places have been closed. We're closing places. We're still talking about closing Allen Homes and other places, perhaps where folks have never had to keep a yard, have never had to cut grass, have never had to, you know, park a car in the driveway. What education programs can we look at through your code compliance versus code enforcement model to get us to that point. But putting the police on the street with a gun and a vest is just not the answer. I don't think it's the answer. But the question that I do have before we move on to the revisions and ideas section is about the demolitions. You mentioned that there's a demolition list of about 300 plus properties. Do you all keep that master list, or does another department keep that master list?
Environmental services.
Okay. And do you know if it's still about 300 plus, or are we working through that?
It is.
Okay, and do we have an idea how much it costs to clear that list, to go block by block?
I think that would better come from Lonnie Wimberly over at Environmental Services than me. I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay, I know he's doing a great job so far managing those demolitions. We need to take our hats off to him. And he may need a little extra help with funding, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
One question, Madam Administrator.
Commissioner Johnson, in response to your demolition listing question, I wanted to point out that the Augusta Land Bank has a separate demolition listing. So
there are more than one
there's
demolition list?
more than one demolition listing. Environmental Services has a listing, and then the Augusta Land Bank has a listing.
And, I'm glad you said that, Administrator, because that's the frustrating part here, where we keep talking about duplicative services. Mr. Mason just spoke about that a week or so ago. We spoke about that a year or so ago. I mean, if there should be one master list of properties that need to be demoed, so that everyone can be on the same page, I'm thinking. And then not only do we need to just make sure that we have that list consolidated, if we're knocking down houses at the rate that I know that we are, but we're not doing it in a way to where it can actually be visible to folks in this city, I mean, I think that's a problem too. So we took our resources and we pulled them by community. I'm not saying you advocate for one side of town over the other, but if you know that districts 1 and 2 have majority of the blight in the community, let's tackle districts 1 and 2 from a compliance perspective until we can reach some type of result. But to have more than one list, I don't think that serves us any purpose.
Well, keep in mind, the Augusta Land Bank is not a department of the city of Augusta. They are a separate entity. So their listing will always be separate, although it is funded with county dollars. I just wanted to make sure you knew that when you're speaking of the 300, that is the county departmental listing, but you may be receiving calls for property that is owned by the Augusta Land Bank that may be on a separate demolition listing.
So if a property is owned by the land bank and it needs to be demolished, it wouldn't necessarily be on the list that Environmental Services have?
That's correct.
Even though it's still a blighted property?
That's correct.
And we struggle with the same thing. So, because we're fielding the calls regardless. So, and then we call and we see who's going where. But in general, it's just, you asked the question about how much or where are we. If we're averaging about $7,500 to tear down a unit and we've got 300, we're at $2.25 million to clear what we have. What we want to remember is when you tear down, now you've got vacant lots, you got stuff sitting there. But I'm personally, from a professional standpoint, I think you tear it down anyway. I'd rather cut grass than have people in structures that are dilapidated and you have the risk of harm. So I don't look at that as a deterrent. I know it's cited quite a bit, but it's not a deterrent from a planning perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Winder.
So to add to that, the properties that the land bank have that are dilapidated, we have cases on those just to have in our inventory to know which ones the land bank own. But we don't take those properties to nuisance abatement court to get an order. The land bank is going to handle their own, if that makes sense.
So out of the properties that, I'll move on from it. Thank you. I'll move on from it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner from the 5th, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, sir. I have just one question. Regardless of whose list it is on, it should be taken care of as far as cutting the grass is concerned, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess that covers everything I was thinking about, because it really shouldn't be blighted. We just need to do our job. Okay.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Winder, proceed.
All right. Moving on. Ordinance revision ideas. How can we clear the hurdle? So on the left side, you'll see current language, and on the right side, you're going to see a proposed revision. This is in regards to when a permit is issued, that permittee or that contractor has 6 months to start work. Our revision states that they need to start work in 60 days. It also says that they need to call in a passable or approvable inspection within 90 days. Because what happens is when a permit is issued, they may start work or they may not start work in those 6 months. Just say they do start work. They can keep going little by little and nothing is done, and that prolongs our case. One other thing we added to it was that I would have the authority to extend the permit if they doing work. So this revision is only for building permits. Repeat and chronic offenders. Commissioner Johnson, this may help with the situation in Harrisburg with the repeat offenders. Now, this ordinance would define what a repeat violator is and what a chronic violator is. And it would also pose a administrative fee for once a person is determined to be a repeat or chronic violator. And the next one just talks about whenever code enforcement sees a violation, we have to send out a notice saying what's the problem, you have this amount of time to fix it. But what we did was added an exception to the rule. If you are a repeat or chronic violator, we would be able to issue a court citation in lieu of sending out that violation notice. This is only for repeat or chronic violators. Otherwise, we send out a notice and give due process. Tools for success, what has worked? What new programs do we have? Nuisance abatement court, last year we took 136 cases through nuisance abatement court. We were able to get 76 demo orders. The other cases were either in compliance, the homeowner maybe rehabbed it or tore it down themselves, or it probably was a continuance. Magistrate court, we had 92 cases go through MAD court, 72 were in compliance. And we got to remember, last year I had six inspectors basically working that whole year. 6 inspectors. We just hired these last 2 or 3 at the end of last year. So 3,068 cases were closed in compliance, not referred to another department, but they were actually closed. Some notable wins that we have, Azalea Park. I'm sure the commissioners are familiar with Azalea Park. We brought that property before the commission on last year. They have made great strides. They had some plumbing problems and some unit problems out there, but they've done a great job thus far. A chronic nuisance building we had on Bertram Road. If y'all can visualize Bertram Road at Washington Road, there was a old club. We had problems out there with vagrants going in and out. We worked with the sheriff's office and the fire department. I had to work through a third party due to the owner filing bankruptcy, but we ended up probably about a few months ago getting that building torn down. So that's on Bertram Road, right off Washington Road. Pineview Mobile Home Park was a mobile home park on Gordon Highway and Wiles Road. Terrible. It was terrible. We took it through nuisance abatement court. I think we got around 36 orders. The owner came out and tore down 23 of those, so he's still working on getting that straight. Some that we have in progress, Clarion Suites on Washington Road. They are starting to build over there. The commercial building right around the corner at 9th and Telfair Street, if you can visualize where that is, that's code. That's code enforcement. So when you see that going on, think about it. That's code. That's us doing that. A vacant motel on Gordon Highway in Molly Pond. That one should be demolished between April and May. So those are just some things that we got in progress right now, to say the least. Some new programs. One is the redevelopment and blighted property program. That program is aimed at redevelopment and blight reduction. It actually defines what blighted is, but it also requires a judge to affirm the blight. And once that happens, it will be transferred over to the tax office, and the property taxes will increase. But after compliance, it does offer a tax incentive. The next program that we have is is a new program, Supply to Comply Tool Lending Program. I'm gonna let my senior inspector, Brandy Palmer, give y'all a little information about Supply to Comply. And we're almost done. Did you pass it out?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Ms. Palmer.
So, Mr. Johnson, this is actually going to talk about your grandmother and the other residents out there. So this is actually going to be a good thing. As code enforcement officers every day out there, we actually hear the same repeated reasons as to why people cannot maintain their properties, why they can't cut their grass, why they can't trim their hedges, why they can't weed eat around the sidewalks and curbs. The lawn equipment breaks down. The people can't afford to repair or replace these items. They definitely can't afford to hire a company to come out and do it on a regular basis. And our time limit on that only gives 10 days for them to do so. So the Code Enforcement Division of Augusta's Planning and Development Department recognized a need in our community. We developed a new initiative in order to assist our residents with the struggles facing many of our properties today. Supply to Comply will be launched immediately following this presentation. It's going to be a pilot program which is going to supply the necessary tools such as lawnmowers, weed eaters, blowers, to all the Richmond County residents who may be facing temporary hardships or challenges. Last year alone, code enforcement actually handled 813 cases in which overgrowth was addressed on. That's a lot of overgrown properties that people just couldn't cut their grass. By providing access to the tools required to perform the job, we anticipate not only a higher rate of compliance, but also a faster completion time. This is going to eliminate the volume of calls not only that we receive to our office, but also the volume of calls that each of you receive by those residents that my neighbor still has not cut his grass. Participants will be provided a program flyer, which I think may have been provided to each of you today. On the inside of that flyer, it will have an application that they can return to our office. Once we review that application and it gets its final approval, we'll actually call the residents by phone and let them know when and where they can actually pick up those tools to be able to use, say, for a weekend. There's actually over 50 municipalities across the United States right now that have similar programs. They've seen great success in states like Texas, Arizona, Ohio, Colorado, and 2 cities right here in Georgia actually have a program that's very, very similar. Both Atlanta and Athens are both having active programs in which they have tool lending to their residents. They're seeing high compliance rates, they're seeing happiness within their communities, they're seeing property values increase. So we think that this is going to be a really great way for our residents to be able to get those items that they need to be able to come into compliance and maintain their yards more regularly. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Vassar, Terrence. Not sure.
Okay. We do have some brochures if y'all would like some. Please? Okay.
All right.
So we are at the point where y'all unload all of your questions, what you would like us to try to make an effort to change. And then we also have our wonderful legal representative here who will tell us we can, let's talk about it, or no, Carla. So what would you all like to see happen with code enforcement in regards to, we already listed out, and you got a separate handout about the challenges, and we have some recommendations on how to get things done a little bit faster. But what are some things that we may have missed that you would like to communicate with us so that we can capture that?
You got it, Mr. Lehner. We have a full queue. Commissioner from the 8th, Commissioner Garrett.
Thank you. Actually, this is going to go back to the previous slides that y'all were talking about, and this question is actually for Terrence. You were talking a lot about due process and things like that. Can you explain what your due process is, and is it different for code enforcement than any other agency?
No. So all code enforcement agencies have a due process. You got to remember voluntary compliance, so it's not always issuing a citation. Depending on what code, the violation is covered under dictates how long they have as far as due process. If it's something dealing with our International Property Maintenance Code, they have 20 days to appeal. And what we've brought before you is we want to decrease that time, that appeal process, to 5 days. So after the 5 days, we can go ahead and take action. Right now it's 20 days. So that's why we at least give 21 days from the time they receive the notice. So that's only for property maintenance, but a nuisance, cutting grass, something small, would be 10 days.
So in talking about these changes to the codes, you know, you've talked about all the difficulties in trying to get teeth through the court system and other means of enforcing and, you know, trying to get that action that I think that we're all attempting to get through these different processes. So how will changing these ordinances or codes change anything if you're not able to really enforce it?
We will be able to enforce it, but what we're saying is we have to give due process before we can take action as far as a court citation. Quicker response time.
Okay. And you know, you mentioned that one of your success stories is one of the hotels on Washington Road. I know that there's been quite a few of those in the news here lately, just in reference to some of the crimes and other things that have taken place. And I know that one where a man had deceased, there was an inspection done on his room, and that room was condemned. Was that you guys, or was that the marshals?
That was code enforcement. We handle unsanitary conditions inside of houses, inside of apartments.
Okay,
yes, that's code.
So if you're going into a public place like a hotel, and you know that there's one room that you had to condemn because of the unsanitary conditions, was there a reason why there wasn't an inspection done on the whole facility?
We got to have reasonable cause to be able to go and do inspections on all the other rooms. I think this is something that Commissioner Franum brought up in the commission meeting a couple weeks ago and was wondering why the hotel, the whole hotel wasn't either shut down or why wasn't it inspected.
So is one room being condemned not reasonable cause that there might be others?
No.
Okay.
No, we have done the room beside, each room beside, but if you have a person that dies of a heart attack in a room, you don't condemn the whole hotel.
I'm not talking about because of the death. I mean, you condemn the room because of the conditions of the
Right,
room.
so the room is condemned, and then sometimes we do the ancillary, the rooms immediately adjacent. But to shut a whole business down, you know, that's we don't have cause for that in most instances.
Can you not then maybe schedule an inspection of the facility, or do you not? We not inspect the
Oh
facility?
yes, we do. We at times we have had to inspect the whole facility. Motel 6 is an example of that. When there is cause or enough repetitive activities and violations, but just in general.
Is it repeated activities within your system, or is it like within all the different, you know, sheriff, marshal, code enforcement?
Yeah, anything that we're made aware of. If we're made aware of it, we can't do anything if we're not made aware of it.
Okay. I mean, I think that kind of speaks of why we need shared systems, but that's beside the point, apparently.
Oh, the sheriff is very, very helpful. We promise you. They come out. They help us a lot, too. They do. We have a good relationship.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Johnson.
To piggyback off of Commissioner Garrett, with the amendment to the Title VII, Article 8, address kind of what Commissioner Garrett is talking about, the administration and enforcement, repeat and chronic offenders. So if you have a hotel and you have multiple rooms at different times, could you then go in and say, look, now we're seeing an issue versus just looking at one property, one room. And
yes.
So you have a Motel 6, for instance, room 2, room 12, room 40.
Yes.
Then you can move in using this ordinance. But
yes.
without this ordinance being this amendment, we don't have much to do there.
We can do it now. We can actually do it now if you have more than one case. But you have one case per quarter, and it's not every hotel. It's just one hotel, and we have a history of calls. We have a reasonable reason to go and request it. And by law, we can't request it currently. This will tighten it up, though. Yes, this will definitely close the gap.
Got you. This amendment is definitely necessary from what I can understand. A couple other questions that I have, and I'm going to pass the mic down. Mr. Widener, you mentioned that there's a motel on Gordon Highway that's going to be demolished in April or May in the Molly Pond area. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But which one is it? Is it the one behind the?
It's one where they have like trucks right behind it. It's not on the same side as Motel 1. It's on the other side.
The old Augusta one.
It's by another place that's right across the street from it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna move on from that one. Next question that I have is, we mentioned the redevelopment and blighted property program. I know that was passed 2021, sometime early part of 21. How effective has that program been? How many properties have we addressed with that program?
So 80 properties have been addressed via the program. Some of them, just the threat has yielded results. We have taken 5 to court. Those have been continued. But the process in general, we think it's going to work. But remember, we said from the onset when we adopted and wrote the program that it's another tool. It's not the primary tool, but it is another tool. But
does it need any tweaking or any
as of right now, we're not. We don't have to tweak the program. We wanted to give people enough time to comply, so we said we'd launch it, and if you had a case, we'd restart the clock. So we have 80 properties that have been warned that they're through that, and then 5 have actually gone to the court, and we're in the process of getting ready to go back to court second quarter, I believe.
Okay. And final question. This supply to comply program is really great. I lift my head up when I heard that. So thank you so much for bringing that to us. Question that I have is, when we restructured the environmental services engineering department some time back, Keep Augusta Beautiful was caught up in that restructuring. But if I'm not mistaken, it is now a program instead of a division or something. Can you shed some light on Keep Augusta Beautiful? Where are we? Because from what I understand, they still have some equipment that we can potentially. I don't know. I'm asking.
Say that again.
Commissioner, I am not aware of any equipment that was available for Keep Augusta Beautiful, although the program as a whole was disbanded because the original agreement had expired. The Environmental Services Department is still able to support community efforts regarding cleanup as well as neighborhood beautification. So the trash bags, the grabbers, the gloves. So we welcome the public as well as any neighborhoods to assist Augusta with those efforts.
Okay, and I may have misspoke on the equipment, so don't get happy yet. But I just wanted to make sure because I knew that they were still, lending a hand there. So maybe that's another tool that we can use for partnership's sake. But that's all the questions that I have now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner from the 1st. Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a few questions here. First off, this one pager that you created, is this something that you're going to get on the next committee cycle, and we're going to move this forward on all of these different aspects?
So what we are going to do is we are going to put it on the committee cycle. We're going to work with our assigned legal person to make sure that we don't put anything in place that would get us in trouble. But we have already begun the conversations. These same ones were listed last year. So we do anticipate being able to move swiftly to committee.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to focus on the hotels for a second. We have Destination Augusta here, and I appreciate them being here. They've met with a lot of the hotel owners with concerns. They've gotten a lot of feedback. This body all got letters in October from visitors on their experiences staying in different hotels. My question is, you talked about we can't do anything unless there's multiple cases and whatnot. Lieutenant Johnson, I've had multiple conversations with him. I was at a homeowners association with him last week. And my question is, we have kind of two categories. We have hotels that have their private security, and it seems like there's not a lot happening because they have the private security. Then we got these hotels that don't have private security. They hand out Narcans. They do this, prostitution craziness going on without. What can we do as a government to hold the ones that don't have the security when we know the sheriff's department are going there almost daily with different issues?
So we're aware, and of course we're going out when the coroner's going out. We're going out when everyone else is going out too. One of the things that we talked about, we sat down and we met with our legal in regards to what our options are. As a commission, you have the ability to suspend, probate, or put on probation someone's business license. We as a department don't have that. If we're made aware of it, like say for instance, we'll use Azalea Park, we will come before you and say, hey, we would like some help with a little bit more push, more threat behind it. So if we bring it to you and you have the option to suspend. If there is criminal activity, that is outside of our realm. So, there is a whole process for which you move through the district attorney's office on the criminal stuff. But if it's just the general upkeep, that is something that we can bring before you, and we can give you a list of them, and you can make that push with us, and we'll gladly do that. But the criminal activity is something we can't take part in, or we don't take part in.
And I appreciate that. I think that's where I think that for me as one commissioner, I think that we need to set some kind of parameters, guidelines that because I don't believe that probably the sheriff's department, every time the sheriff's department is going to these hotels.
Right.
So, I mean, I've heard a lot about what these 3 or 4 hotels are going to around in my district, not just my district, Gordon Highway too, but I believe, have to get serious about this because it is affecting not only hotels, but businesses in that corridor, other corridors as well. And I think that however we can create some kind of guidelines, if the X amount of times they're called, and put them on a 90-day probation. If they do it again, suspend their license for a year. Like when we shut down one hotel in that area, they're all going to get on the page, and we don't need to be scared to shut down a hotel anymore because they are overriding this community in so many areas, not just the area that I represent, but other areas in this community. And it's not just hotels, but I do know that some of the hotels in my district are not doing things up to standards. And I guess that's where I'm asking for feedback on what this body can do to hold them more accountable. If it means taking their license, we take their license, but we just can't be doing the same things because it's not working.
I think, we can always address the things, structural property maintenance, but part of that, to the detriment is all of the loitering and things of that nature. And a collaborative effort with the sheriff's department to bring some of their issues to us so we can help package and let y'all know of business licenses that are experiencing these chronic nuisances. That would be the role or the avenue. We wouldn't be in a position to take on the criminal activity, but we could definitely collaborate with their legal, our legal, and see how we can get this in front of you so you can make the example.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because when you have the BP that has had 74 instances, I think the Raceways had 125 or whatever.
311 between those two properties alone.
Those properties shouldn't be open right now, frankly. We should have shut them both down. I guarantee that corridor would be a lot different than it is right now. And so whatever it takes for us to be able to do that, I think that's what I'm asking for the support. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 10th, Commissioner Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Delaney, underneath your new programs, you have increase of property taxes for non-compliance. Can you give me some insight on that, please?
So on the blight ordinance, basically it's written off of, and that's the paraphrase, blight ordinance, the short version. Essentially, it's written around the state law, which says that once a property comes into compliance, that the penalty that they had paid is refunded to them over a course of 3 years. So essentially, that's how their property, bringing the property into compliance, making it look better, that increases typically the value. In addition to that, the property owner won't feel a loss because they will pretty much recoup any type of penalty over the course of 3 years by maintaining that property. So that is just to pull out a particular reference within the ordinance. It is lengthy, the ordinance in and of itself, but that's just a highlight of it, one of the highlights.
Okay. Two more notes on the Matthews. They had bought the hotel right there at Gordon Highway and right there across from X-Mart. And he's been giving me phone calls because of the threatening letters. But in order to do a demolition, anything built before 1976, I believe, is subject to asbestos laws, etc. Do y'all take that into consideration before you write letters and threaten to take people to court?
Not if the condition is in a dilapidated state. One of the things we also do is we work and we talk to the property owner. So if they say, hey, we've put out for asbestos study, then we put that in there, and that's how you get your extension. If they haven't communicated with us, or it's not, or it's in a state where it's causing potential harm, say there was a crime there was a death there, they're all kind of factors that influence whether or not an extension is granted.
Right, and the last item is underneath what Manager Terrence has said under the Title VII Building and Construction 7189 Conditions of Permit. I actually spoke to Marshall Masters mid last year, and I was telling him about a house that was supposed to be built, and they never did do anything with it. And he said he proposed something last year, and I'm glad to see that y'all adopted his resolution under here, where if nothing's been done for 60 days, you're allowed to make it the permit invalid.
Terrence brought that about 2 years ago.
Did he?
Yes, Mr. Winder brought that 2 years ago in regards to that. So yes.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner from the 6th, Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On your page here, I don't know if it's a typo or not, but we might need to make clear these numbers that you have here. I don't, Mr. Winder or Ms. Delaney, on B, chronic violator is a responsible party who is found to be in violation of this ordinance on at least 6, and then you have in parentheses 3. So we need to make sure what those numbers are. Is it 3 or is it 6?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
That's just a typo. And the other one is on this supply and comply, I'm glad to know that Commissioner Johnson's 80-year-old grandmother will be able to obtain some tools to help getting her grass mowed. I don't know if she'll be the one mowing it, but it's good to know that she'll be able to have those supplies. And one last thing, Ms. Delaney, have you all ever got a lot of complaints or Mr. Weiner complaints on some of our dollar stores in the Augusta area by way of cleanliness, out exterior? And the reason I
touching my heart here, yes.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because in District 6, I have 4 Family Dollar stores. Mm-hmm. And believe you me, I make a habit of inspecting those stores on a continuous basis. Mm-hmm. Case in point, the one on Windsor Spring Road, there was when they're building new stores, they have a sign up says coming soon. Yep. That store has been in my neighborhood for 13 years and is still coming soon. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to Mr. Cliff, who is the district manager for the Family Dollar stores up in my area, and I've been in contact with him about the cleanliness of those stores, be it the paper, the litter on the outside. They hire these companies to cut the grass, they mow the grass, they mow the paper along with the grass, and they blow it to the back of the store. But it doesn't relieve them of the responsibility of them upkeeping and still keeping up their store. So on yesterday, Mr. Cliff came from North Carolina because I summoned him here to look at these stores that I'm having problems with in our neighborhoods. And guess what happened on yesterday? He finally removed a sign that said coming soon after 13 years, and along with the one on Rosa Road and Peach Orchard Road, so much litter and trash that he actually had employees to clean all of that up. And my question is this: how often do we get complaints from these dollar stores that are not doing a good job? Our mayor talks about keeping the city clean and cleaning the city up, and we have these stores that are applying for beer and wine license, and we bend over backwards for them for things like that, and they do not do our neighborhoods justice when it comes down to cleaning up their stores inside and outside. And I think we need to do a better job of enforcing these stores.
Amen.
So you are speaking my language here. So I recently, I was talking to Terrence, and we have taken action because when you go in the store and the parking lot is nasty, you don't want to shop there. When we take potential developers to South Augusta and in certain parts of Augusta as a whole, and they see this is, oh, you've got a store, but it's trashed. on the outside, they are all impacted. So we have actually started, and we don't want to step on anyone's toes because the ordinance clearly states that parking lots and litter is the marshals. So that is clearly theirs, but if we're aware of it, we are taking action. So rather than just citing or giving notification to the whole complex, we went to each individual tenant and we gave them a written letter. For instance, Tobacco Road at Windsor Spring, the Walmart and the out parcels and the Dollar Tree. They cleaned it up. 2 weeks later, it's still starting to get back to where it is. So I've already told staff, we're going to get back out there. But this is we do know it's theirs, but I will tell you, yes, we are on it, we are aware, and we are making a conscious effort to do something about it. And the letters have gone out. Proof is moving, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 2nd, Commissioner Pulliam.
Thank you so much, Mayor Johnson. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Widener and Director Delaney. My question is for the slide that is new programs, where it says requires judge to affirm blighted condition. I know earlier in the presentation you mentioned something concerning 3 years, how it could be hung up in a court system. How long does it take the judge to hear the case once we've deemed it as blighted? Is that in that 3-year time period? Can you kind of walk us through that?
So I want to make sure the redevelopment ordinance, which we are calling the blight ordinance, is completely separate.
Okay.
That is outside of nuisance and abatement court. In abatement court, this is a separate process for our chronically neglected properties. So that was referencing just that portion. So once that ordinance came into play, because within 60 days, we can start the process of saying, hey, you have not cleaned up your property. At 90 days, we can take you to court. So we started the clock. That was a tool to start the clock a little sooner because we didn't want to just have things sitting there. So it's a separate, but it is through the court system. We make the soft designation of blight, and the court reaffirms that. And then we can move through the process that's outlined. And I will be sure to get you a copy of that ordinance and we can sit down and talk to you about it again too, because we did, yeah. But it's there.
I definitely have the same sentiments as Commissioner from the 1st, Commissioner Johnson, because District 1 and District 2, the blight is, as everyone knows, astronomical, to say the least. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 9th, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, sir. Director Delaney, I know you all talked about hotels and condemning rooms. How about apartment complex? Do it have to be more than one room, one apartment, or what? Because I was just in, and Mayor Johnson and I discussed this particular apartment complex, and it's horrible. Even though there's they said they was going to get it up and get it running, but I don't see how. So is it one apartment? Is it a floor? Or you can just you take one complaint at a time?
So in typical, and I'll use the one that we did, and you're all familiar with Azalea Park. We started with one notification. Then we found out that it spread. When we went to the site, our inspectors went to the site, neighbors came out and said, hey, I've got a problem. As soon as we know it exceeds more than one unit, we're out there. Typically, we'll do the floor if necessary, and then sometimes in Azalea Park, we took buildings out. So it just depends on the nature of the problem. If it's something that's health, sanitary, sewer, anything like that, we're taking everything on that line down. Everything that's immediately adjacent comes down, meaning we're condemning it and moving people out. So we don't, where people live versus where people shop, there's a 24-hour requirement, and we want people to be safe. I mean, they expected to be able to be there 24 hours a day in your home. So we do move faster, and we do reach a little bit further, especially when we know. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Keeler? Madam District Commissioner from the 1st.
Mr. Mayor, they're bothering me down here. I just have a question. They won't even let me speak, sir. I want to go back to this dollar store question. That's my final question, I promised. I know this isn't a code compliance related question, and maybe I'm going to ask it anyway. Are we able to pass some type of dispersal policy to limit the amount of dollar stores in the community?
I will defer to my legal counsel on that one.
I'll tell you what, instead of going that route, we'll handle that in committee one day.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam Administrator, we have anything further?
No, sir, but I would just like to say thank you, commissioners, for your time. This has been a long day, and the proposed amendments and revisions to the ordinances will be coming to you during committee.
Thank you. Director Delaney, Deputy Director Vassar, Mr. Widener, Ms. Tyra, and Brandy Palmer, thank you guys so much for this presentation. It's been phenomenal. Consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.